In 1909, H.G. Wells was already famous for his stories about Martians and time machines, but he wrote a book that was far more grounded in the uncomfortable realities of his own time. Ann Veronica, a modern love story, was a scandalous departure from his science fiction. It wasn't about aliens or the future, but about the immediate, pressing struggle for female autonomy in Edwardian England. When it was released, it was so controversial that its original publisher actually refused to print it, fearing its feminist themes and its blunt treatment of sex and social politics. It was a novel of the new woman, a term used at the time to describe women who were beginning to demand intellectual, political, and sexual independence. To understand Ann Veronica, we have to start in the quiet, suffocating atmosphere of Morningside Park. Ann Veronica Stanley is a young woman living a life that, on the surface, looks perfectly respectable. She lives with her father, Peter Stanley, in a world of social calls, tea, and the expectation that her primary function is to be a decorative, well-behaved daughter. But for Ann Veronica, this life feels like a functionless existence. She is intellectually hungry and deeply restless. She doesn't want to just exist within the boundaries set by her father and her Aunt Molly, who represent the traditionalist status quo. She wants to know why things are the way they are, and she wants the right to decide her own path. The tension in the house reaches a breaking point through small, symbolic moments, like a confrontation over a door latch, that represent the larger, more difficult task of breaking away from familial control. Ann Veronica realizes that as long as she is under her father's roof, she is essentially a ward, a child whose life is being managed for the sake of propriety. Driven by a need for intellectual and personal autonomy, she makes the radical decision to leave the safety of her home and head to London. The transition from the sheltered suburbs to the chaos of London is jarring. For Ann Veronica, the city isn't just a place of opportunity, it is a place of intense vulnerability. She quickly learns that for a woman without money or a male protector, the city can be predatory. She experiences the male gaze in its most literal and uncomfortable forms. She finds herself navigating a world where her survival is tied to the men she encounters, and she quickly discovers that even kind men come with strings attached. She meets two men who represent the two different ways men of her era attempted to control women. First, there is Mr. Manning. He is a romantic idealist, the kind of man who views women as sacred muses. He doesn't want to rule over Ann Veronica so much as he wants to worship her. But this brand of woman worship is just another form of imprisonment. By treating her as a sacred object, he denies her any actual agency. She is a statue to be admired, not a person with her own messy, political, and complicated needs. Then there is Mr. Ramage. He is much more pragmatic and, in many ways, much more dangerous. He offers Ann Veronica financial support, but it is a transactional relationship. He provides the capital she needs to survive, but there is an unspoken expectation of intimacy. The tension between her need for economic survival and her desire for true independence comes to a head in a violent confrontation at the Hotel Rococo. When Ramage attempts to claim her as a conquest, Ann Veronica is forced to face the cold reality that, in this society, a woman's economic independence is often just a precursor to a different kind of male dominance. Seeking a purpose that goes beyond the struggle for mere survival, Ann Veronica becomes drawn into the radical suffrage movement. She joins a group of activists, including the energetic and often manic Nettie Miniver, who are pushing for the right to vote through direct action. This isn't just intellectual debate in a parlour, it becomes physical and dangerous. Ann Veronica participates in a daring raid on the House of Commons, an act of civil disobedience that leads to her arrest and incarceration in Canongate Prison. The experience of prison is a turning point for her. Inside the walls, she undergoes a profound psychological crisis. She is forced to confront her own ego and the uncomfortable truth of her own dependence. She realizes that her rebellion, while noble, has been fueled by a certain kind of individualistic pride. The isolation of prison strips away her illusions, forcing her to grapple with the reality of how deeply she is still tied to the social structures she is trying to tear down. Upon her release, Ann Veronica attempts to navigate the world as a woman who has been tainted by scandal and debt. She tries to return to the life of social respectability, entering into a strategic engagement with Mr. Manning. It is a calculated move, a way to secure her social standing and hide her financial struggles. But this life of compromise feels hollow. Wells uses the metaphor of being wrappered to describe this existence. Social conventions, decency, and the roles we play for others act like layers of packaging. They might make the surface look neat and presentable, but they hide the raw, often sordid or vivid reality of human life. Ann Veronica finds that living a rapid life is a form of slow death. It is during this period of social performance that she meets Capes, a brilliant and unconventional biology lecturer. Their connection is fundamentally different from anything she has experienced before. While her previous relationships were defined by either paternalistic worship or transactional control, her connection with Capes is a collision of intellectual passion and biological reality. This is where Wells's exploration of love becomes most provocative. In the Edwardian era, there was a strong emphasis on spiritual or platonic love. The idea that a true connection was a meeting of souls, something elevated above the physical. But through Ann Veronica and Capes, Wells argues for a more modern biological understanding of intimacy. Their relationship is visceral. It is rooted in the physical reality of being human beings. It isn't just about ideas, it's about the body and the intense driving force of biological attraction. This realization leads them to a radical decision. They decide to abandon the constraints of their conventional lives, the social expectations, the marriages, the decency, and flee to the Swiss Alps. In the mountains, specifically during a climb of the Mitterhorn, they experience a sense of absolute liberation. The physical ascent serves as a metaphor for their attempt to reach a higher, more authentic way of living, stripped of the rags of social convention. In the thin air of the Alps, they feel they have found a way to exist that is honest, unmediated, and free. However, the story does not end with a permanent escape into the mountains. The ending is bittersweet and deeply realistic. Eventually, Ann Veronica and Capes return to society. They have achieved the stability and respectability they once fought so hard to escape. They have found a way to live together that is socially acceptable, but the victory is complicated. The novel concludes with the daunting realization that even the most radical, liberated life must eventually face the weight of domesticity. As they settle into a more stable existence, there is a persistent fear that the intense, youthful passion that fueled their rebellion, the petals of their love, will eventually be smothered by the secondary things of a settled life, the bills, the social obligations, the mundane routines of a household. When we look back at Ann Veronica, we see a book that is deeply concerned with the cost of living authentically. Wells suggests that there is a fundamental tension between the individual and society, between passion and stability. He argues that true independence for a woman isn't just about the right to vote or the right to study, it is about economic agency. Without it, a woman is always caught in a long string of dependencies, whether she is being worshipped as a goddess or supported as a charity case. The book also challenges the Victorian ideal of the angel in the house. Ann Veronica refuses to be an angel, she chooses to be a human being, with all the messy biological and political implications that entails. By moving from the stifling domesticity of her childhood to the chaotic struggle of London, and finally to the raw liberation of the Alps, her journey is a map of the struggle for selfhood. Ultimately, the novel leaves us with a question about the nature of progress. We see Ann Veronica achieve her goals. She finds intellectual connection, she finds a partner, and she finds a way to live on her own terms. But the ending suggests that every liberation comes with a new kind of compromise. To live in the world, we must eventually wrap ourselves in its conventions, and the challenge is to ensure that those layers of packaging don't eventually become a shroud for the very passion that made us want to be free in the first place.